Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Paul Golan. I'm Executive Director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism. Thank you for joining us for this release party of our winter 2026 issue of Humanistic Judaism Magazine on the theme of resilience. I thought it was an excellent issue. You should have received an email with the digital version, and if you are a member of SHJ, you'll be receiving a physical printed copy in the mail. Once again, I think it is beautifully designed. I think the materials are excellent, and I look forward to turning it over to our editor, Cantor Jonathan Friedmann, to lead us through it and introduce our guests. So I'm going to put you on spotlight. Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As Paul mentioned, I'm also very happy with the results. This issue, resilience, of course, is a very topical subject, and obviously, I think in the culture now, resilience is very important. So, what we tried to do with the issue, as the cover tells us, is look at resilience in all of its forms. So, let me just pull up the issue and take us through it a little. Um, so, my task as editor was really to reach out to different, not only people, but people in different fields and to get their take on what resilience means to them in their work and in their lives. And what we got as a result was a very eclectic assortment of people, beginning with Rob Kuttner, who is a comedy writer who wrote for The Daily Show and Conan O'Brien. And if you have kids or grandkids, maybe you're familiar with Teen Titans or Ben 10, other cartoons as well. He gives us a humorous look at resilience, really actually looking at how humor is a form of resilience. That's followed with a review of a wonderful new contribution to, I don't know if it's the appropriate terminology, but humanistic Jewish liturgy. This is Herbert Levine's book, Blessed Are You, Wondrous Universe, reviewed by Diane Rose, who is the leader of the Karov community of humanistic Judaism in Santa Monica, California, and really looking at how, in some ways, our desire to perpetuate ritual is itself an act of resilience. How do we keep these old things alive in new garb, shedding some of the things that don't work anymore? And that's certainly part of what this book is all about. Blessed Are You, Wondrous Universe. Ari Ashkenazi, one of my friends from Adat Chavarim in Los Angeles area, where I'm the leader, he will be presenting, so I won't share too much about his particular article, but it is a wonderful, very personal look at how resilience has found its way into different areas of his life and his journey. And again, we'll talk more about that in a moment. That's followed by a Bay Area rabbi friend of mine, Anita Barsman, who is also a poet, and she shares a poem about her grandmother's very difficult immigration story to the United States from Europe. And this is a picture of grandmother and grandfather and so forth. And so we follow that with a look at creativity as an antidote to despair. How does creativity factor into resilience? Another rabbi friend of mine, Kalila Miller, from the Reconstructionist movement in Philadelphia, has found that artistic practice is one way to keep your head above water these days. Speaking of art, Eric Glickman, a very talented cartoonist, is collaborating with a friend of his, Michael Hirsch. Stephen Hirsch. They've been business partners in advertising, in the advertisement field for many years, also very close friends. And Stephen has Alzheimer's. And this is a comic that is really taking a warm and in some ways very comical, if that word is appropriate, look at how their friendship is changing due to Alzheimer's and how they're persevering through friendship and humor and love. And it's quite fun to read. If you're interested in this, as you'll see in the magazine itself, you can follow them on Substack. I think every week or so, you'll see a new comic. It's an unfolding series in real time. Adam Skrinsky, who is one of our rabbinic students at the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism and also a medical doctor, gives us a medical perspective drawn primarily from his work in the HIV field and how resilience plays out in that way. And Maggie Rawling, who is with us as well, I'm not going to share too much because we'll be talking to her in a moment. She's a documentary filmmaker, also a student in the leadership program at IISHJ, and she uh, focuses on the marginalized in our society, in her films, and finds many stories of resilience among them, and is inspired by those stories, in fact, as we will learn. And then finally, in our values in action, uh, I guess, column, let's call it, Paul Golan comes through yet again with a powerful take on the intersection of humanistic Judaism, American political landscape, and in this case, resilience, looking specifically at how the resilience of American democracy. I know things just got very serious as I said that, but the resilience of American democracy depends on all of us, in fact. It's a very important read. Okay, so that's what we have in store in this issue. If you haven't received or haven't looked through your digital copy yet, the physical one should be going out soon. And I think it's time to introduce our guests. Do you want to spotlight them? Well, there's Ari. And there's Maggie. I will say just parenthetically that both Ari and Maggie are members of my community in the Los Angeles area. It's not the only reason why I chose them to be my guests, but it was convenient. They are really excellent individuals and artists as well, as we're looking at the theme for today, the art of resilience, creativity, hope, and perseverance. Ari holds a PhD in anthropology of art and arts education and is a professor emeritus at Cal State Los Angeles. He's also an ordained Zen monk, in addition to being a humanistic Jew, and that plays into the resilience story quite a bit. Ari's also a prolific memoirist. He has 5 collections of memoirs at this point, if I'm not mistaken. Walking Barefoot on Nails, The Skeptic, Jews, Zen, and Blindness, among others. Thanks for joining us, Ari. And Maggie Rawling is a human rights activist, actor, writer, documentary filmmaker, student chaplain, as well as in the leadership program at IISHJ. Focuses primarily on documentary films, including Tucson Salvage, The Whole Enchilada, and a forthcoming film, I think, which will be released in May, which is Salvaged Love. And as I mentioned, her documentary filmmaking really focuses on the voices of the marginalized and what we can learn from them in our own lives, really. These are the people who are largely invisible, but have stories of resilience that really do inspire and I think humble the viewer as well, as we'll see in a short little clip that we'll show in just a moment. But I want to start with Ari. One thing that you talked about in your article, oh, I will mention too, I'm going to talk to my friends and then we'll have audience Q&A as well as we typically do. So if you have anything that comes to mind, you could put in the chat as we go, or afterwards, after we're sort of exhausted, we'll have audience Q&A. So Ari, one of the things you talked about in your article is that blindness sort of came upon you very quickly in, I think, the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken,
91. Yeah.
91. And I just wonder, what was that like being someone in the arts, specifically the visual arts, teaching art history, and then not necessarily being able to see the subject that you devoted your life to?
Wow. It was a trauma. I'm not going to deny it. It was terrible. Uh, but it didn't take me long to realize that I was starting a life that I hadn't planned on having. And the one thing that's not in the article, and I can't figure out why I didn't bring this up, is the whole issue of gratitude. It's a very ticklish subject. You don't want to, I mean, I would find it difficult to say I'm grateful that I lost my eyesight. That would be ridiculous. But in retrospect, I'm grateful for everything that's happened since. And uh, I think a lot of it has to do with sitting in the Zen Center, facing a blank wall and watching my thoughts, which is what I did write about. But I didn't write about gratitude in so many words. Kind of wish I'd put that in.
Yeah, well, there is a word limit, of course, for the articles, so that's understandable and forgivable. Um,
By
yeah,
the way,
so yeah.
I didn't really stop doing the art.
Mhm.
I swear I did painting for a while. Um, I was inspired by the knowledge that Claude Monet kept painting even though he was losing his eyesight. And I tried it, and I was fairly successful, at least for myself. I've got a whole bunch of paintings as a result, but that ended in about 2018, 2019. And the arts are wonderful in the sense that they all function in basically the same way. They're, what I mean by that is that you can switch from, if you're capable of it, you can switch from one form to another. And the same rules function in all of them.
Mm.
So that's quite helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that in the article in the magazine on creativity as well. Rabbi Miller talks about you can find creativity in anything that we do, right? So there's artistic expression waiting for us, even if that means cooking, gardening, um, in your case now writing memoirs, that sort of thing, right? That's another shift that you've taken artistically. And so really it's accessible to everyone because everyone as a human being has this artistic capacity. Doesn't mean we need to be professionals, but we do have this creative side, all of us, and we can express it in so many different ways. And I think you're right, it's like translatable. I sometimes
Mhm.
worry as a musician about losing my hearing. I know someone in the comments mentioned Beethoven, but I know I could switch to something else if I needed to as well because of what you're saying. Maggie, how you doing?
Good.
Um, so as I mentioned, you found resilience in maybe unexpected places or places that are hiding in plain sight as we traverse our American city streets. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I've always been someone who enjoyed stopping and talking to people that many would perhaps roll up their window or run away from. And I have learned a lot from former prisoners and unhoused people. And I speak Spanish, so I tend to stop and speak with a lot of gardeners. And I was a gardener for a few years. And I just noticed that there's an entire sort of class of transparent people in our world. And so many people pass them by and assume they don't have their own wisdom and their own take on the world. And so many times, because they are outsiders, they're sort of given this meta-analysis and this time and space to tease out whole philosophies that we never access. And I've always been very fascinated by people who live on the margins of the normal society. And so that's really influenced my life. And it's definitely the inspiration and source of my filmmaking.
That's excellent. In fact, it's a great segue to the clip that you prepared, which I can share. Could you just give us a little setup for that?
Sure. This is my friend Pepper and her partner John. They met on the streets, and I met Pepper buying her a sandwich and stopping and hearing her life story at a local sandwich shop. And we've stayed friends ever since. And here she is to tell her story herself.
Right. Hopefully this will be viewable and heard by all.
Deuce picked him for me because he was so calm. This is Deuce. Deuce, aka Deucey Momo Achocho. Yeah. This is my buddy. He's my child. He's my fur baby. He's my fur baby. He needs me as much as I need him, and and he loved him. And John is very polite and sweet. He's nice. Not like I'm not used to what I'm not used to. I'm not used to that stuff at all. But then and then here we are. 2.5 years later, we've been through hell and back, and still fighting every day. And now, every day we worry about losing our house. It's always a worry. Like, I don't want to go back there. No, I don't. I can't. I'm too sick. When I thought this time that we were gonna lose our place, God, I wanted to die. I have more scars in the last 3 months on my body than I've had. Because I'll be sitting and watch TV, and I'll just rip the scab off, and I'm diabetic, and so I don't heal fast. I've been having a lot of health problems, really bad health problems lately, and so it's all kind of catching up, because our livers are bad. And I started doing heroin after I had lost my kids is when I first used. It was like a week after, so that was in 2002 in the beginning, and that lasted 10 years, off and on the last 4. Mother's Day is the worst day of the world for me. I lost 5 kids. This state took all 5 children, yes. And I did my parenting classes. I did everything but drop clean. I'm the most horrible human being in the world for doing it. And, I had used days before, and then my water broke, and then I had to go to the hospital, and it was in my system still. And, but I would have had my last 2. Stupid, again, for this man. I lost everything for a man, and it's just disgusting. Yeah, I was homeless by myself. Yeah, after my husband left me. When we were homeless, I was more sober when I was homeless than any time in my life. Weirdest thing in the world, and it's really hard to do. Yeah. It was hard. You're up all the time. You're up out in the heat. Can you imagine being out in the heat 24 hours a day like that? It is so hot. You get used to it, and the parks are wonderful. The one with grass, we would stand we'd sit on the hill under one of the trees, and we just kind of move with the shade when the sun went. And that we would go during the day, and that was for years. I had did that for 3 years. When you're homeless, you realize how much the bare necessities of life matter. Those small things, like homeless people are really close. They're really close. They're like family with each other. They're like, because they're out there you're going through the same things, and when people come in who are scummy and scumbags and do dirt, they get rid of them. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not a choice, but other times, it is. Like, I had the choice to go to a shelter for a week out of a month or lose him forever. What would I choose? People are like, oh, you're stupid. No, absolutely, I'm not stupid. I feel like I'm a better person. I try to make a difference in the world and things that I say and how I act to people and how they see me, Then when I started dating him, I was happy all the time, and I'm, you know what I mean? We can hang out with each other. We don't need other people. Like, people are like, oh, you need a break. You need to get away from people. Oh, you need, you know. We don't like breaks. You know, we like hanging out with each other. This whole year and a half has been awesome. You know, like, I'm just so happy, but I'm so scared to lose it every day. I'm terrified. I am, honestly. It's we would say when we first lived here, it's more stressful being here than always being homeless, right?
And of course, that's just one segment from a longer documentary. Maggie, I'm wondering a couple of things. One, she mentioned that homeless people have a very close-knit kind of community that, again, maybe is invisible to the rest of us. And I think in your article too, you talked about the mutual support networks that they established. That was really interesting and inspiring to read about. Could you share a little?
Sure. I mean, there's just a need because of their operating completely outside the capitalist system, except essentially through begging to have to offer mutual aid to one another. So there's a lot of bartering. There's a lot of help of watching each other's dogs or animals. There's a lot of cats and dogs on the streets with the people. Occasionally children, although they usually get picked up by Child Protective Services, which is very traumatic, as Pepper alludes to. She has been meeting with a few of her kids who are old enough now to have aged out of the system. So they do come and see her sometimes. But, you know, there's a group of people in Tucson that meets at the park and does clothing swap every weekend. And some people are housed and some people are not. And some people who have been unhoused and live on the margins in between, like Pepper, are really, really good about showing up with toothbrushes and sunscreen and things that they know you have to survive on the streets in Tucson, Arizona in the summer. And a bunch of us show up with water. And I mean, it's a chance to just sit and be present with each other in a way that it doesn't matter about class. It doesn't matter who anyone is. Everyone there has a story to tell. And if you listen, you learn so much.
Hmm. Well, you sort of hinted at my second question, which was about Tucson, Arizona specifically, and why you think it is such a good place to make documentaries.
It's an amazing spot because it's on the border. So we have all of the people who are influenced by a line on a map that happened less than 100 years ago, where one of the most recent states, a lot of people still reject that and consider Mexico and Arizona to be the same. So we have all of that. We have all of our native community. We have our beautiful Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui people here who have never stopped practicing their traditions. And then we have all of the unhoused people who can't afford to live in California, but need it to be somewhat, sustainable to live outside. So they learn to live in the 100-degree, 110-degree heat during the summer, usually under the freeway bridges. And then you just have a liberal group of people from the college and a lot of people who are attracted to this sort of migrational space between Texas and California, so geographically we kind of are in the middle as well. And I think a lot of trans people are attracted to our community as well because we're very inclusive and there's just everything is on the fringe, right? There's no strong binary here. So it's a great place to make documentaries and to hear great stories.
Yeah, it sounds like you have an endless supply of stories if you wanted to keep making a movie a day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess back to you, Ari. Of course, Maggie's work that we're talking about focuses on other people, and your memoir writing is, of course, very personal in talking about your own life. I'm wondering if you could tell us about how Zen specifically helped you out of sort of life's drudges and your rut and all that sort of thing.
Well, as I said a little earlier, when you practice Zen meditation, you realize that what you're thinking is ethereal. It vanishes as soon as it gets through your brain and you exhale, as I said in the piece, when you exhale, your thought goes away, and that includes feelings too. It's not that they're not real. It's not that you don't feel or that you don't think. Basically, what you do when you're sitting there is that you feel and you think and you exhale and it goes off, you go off into some other place. And I think that once I got over the shock, um, I started watching myself do those things, and it was very healing. It was very fulfilling. It was, I don't know how else to describe it. It made me separate from thinking of everything as a trauma to thinking of everything as a thing or as something that then passed through. And I could focus then on, Maggie's reminding me of what I learned. I worked in a Zen hospice project in San Francisco at the height of the AIDS epidemic. I worked there for around 12 years. And, like the woman in this film, you would meet people that were extraordinary and you would learn about their lives. And they were in a Zen hospice, so sometimes they did meditation with us. And we all knew that they weren't going to be there very long, but they taught all of us a lot. And once I realized what my life was going to be like as a blind man, um, I realized that it was a gift in a lot of ways because I met people I would never have met being a highfalutin PhD professor at Cal State. Um, I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, and one of the stories you've told me in the past had to do with being in a barn when you were training to become a Zen. It's just such a great story. I wonder if you could share it.
Yes, that was when I was in Austin. I was in Austin for 3 years, I think it was. And we had a retreat house that was a remodeled barn, and it had a balcony around the low spot where we were sitting meditation. And we were not facing a wall. We were kind of facing, there was no real wall right in front of us. And I was sitting there, and we were all, Zen meditation, you're very, very still. You literally, put your hands together like so. I can't really do it on Zoom, I'm afraid. That's the best I can do. And your legs are crossed and you're sitting on the floor and you sit there for about 40 minutes without moving. So there are about 20 people in the Zendo, which is the name for the meditation hall. We're sitting there and all of a sudden I noticed that there were vultures landing on the balcony. And I mean, we all knew exactly what they thought. They thought we were all dead. And they were trying to figure out how they could get in. Sometimes they were poked against the glass, And, you're supposed to be quiet and you're supposed to be meditating and everything. But during that session, we started to giggle and we could not stop. It was really hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I think it just means that you were doing it right, I think.
I don't know if we thought of that, but
Yeah.
I'll accept that.
Yeah, I think the appearance of death, I mean, that's pretty hardcore meditation.
Well, we do a walking meditation, walking very, very slowly. It's called Kinhin. And you put your hands together like so. I don't know if you can see the top. And you walk around the room very, very slowly. And we had a man living at the Zen Center. He soon died. I mean, he was an AIDS client. We called them clients or residents. We didn't call them patients. And he he said, we really have to rename this temple. This is in San Francisco. The name of it was Isanji. Isan was the man who founded it. And in Japanese, Ji is at the end, and it means temple. Nothing to do with reform. It's Zen. Okay, so we're walking around doing this. He said, we have to change the name of this place. And somebody said, well, what? I think it was the Zen master, who was Philip Whalen, by the way, the poet, the beat poet. He was my ordaining teacher.
Oh, cool.
He said, we have to rename this place. And Phil said, what do you want to call it? And he said, Zombie G. Because we're all in black clothes and we're walking around like this, or we're sitting waiting for the vultures to come back. And there is a thing in Zen about getting ready for death. It's you practice, you practice being ready.
Yeah. Do you find that to be helpful in terms of your mortality and coming to terms with that aspect of
Yeah, I
reality?
do. I do. Especially,
Hmm.
I'm going to be 84 in a couple of weeks. So I had to go back to DMV to redo my photo because people said I didn't look like the person in the picture anymore. So I got it redone. And I was sitting there, you know how DMV is, it's just terrible. And I was sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. And all of a sudden I thought, wow, I bet this is the last time I'm going to have to do this. And it was a comforting thought. And this is coming from somebody who used to be, well, I was terrified of dying when my eyesight went. And I didn't realize until that happened that a lot of people are terrified of going blind almost as much, or in some cases more so, than dying.
Hmm.
It's a major fear among humans. And somehow sitting, meaning meditating with this, um, it's changed things. I mean, I can't say it any other way because it's not a philosophy and it's not a religion and it's not any of those things. It's literally just sitting there and watching your mind.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Actually have a question for both of you. We'll start with Maggie. Same question, really. But I'm wondering if you, again, both of you have found within humanistic Judaism specifically tools that help you not only with your work that you're doing, whether it's making documentaries, writing memoirs, that sort of thing, but also just in resilience, your own resilience, if you find that there's use within our philosophy or our practices pertaining to resilience.
Yes, I definitely have. I'm very, very grateful for finding humanistic Judaism. And I like that you can be spiritual without having to um, have the man in the sky. That's very helpful to me to find beauty and magic in the world without having to subscribe to someone else's idea of what I should and shouldn't do. I think the three pillars of the justice and equality and self-determination for all people is something that has always appealed to me and that I've always looked for in religious structure and very, very rarely found. Perhaps only in Buddhism did I find anything close. And um, I just I hope that, I love the way that we're inclusive and we're okay with intermarriage and all of the rules that separate people from where they want to be, we try to get rid of so that people can just find their underlying humanity. And that to me is spirituality and the kind of world that I want to see. So I'm very happy and, grateful to have found this community.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, since you mentioned that, if you think of your documentary films as a spiritual project or a spiritual practice, the it does seem like you get really deep into that human experience.
Absolutely. I think there's something beautiful about the art of listening and being present enough to be able to inspire the trust of people to tell them your story and then to do them the correct amount of honor of presenting it in the right way that centers them and uplifts their voice. And then there's a whole other part of it where you get to see them watch themselves on screen and see them bring their people to watch themselves on screen. And we had a big movie theater in town play this movie. And when Pepper and John were sitting there and they saw themselves, 18 feet tall on the big screen, it was so beautiful. And I felt like all of their suffering, they saw not only were they worth something, but other people were feeling and experiencing what they had done, and it mattered. And that meant so much to me that I had some hand in helping them find themselves and see themselves just by centering their voice. I'll never forget it. So yeah, definitely it has a spiritual effect to be helping tell these stories.
That's beautiful. And Ari, I know that Jew-boos or boo-Jews, whatever you like, it's not so uncommon. We all know them. We have them in our families. But, in terms of your long and windy road to get to humanistic Judaism, you went through a lot of different experimentations. So maybe you can just share about that and why you think humanistic Judaism specifically has been helpful at this point in your life.
Well, I'm still evolving, I think. The year I was born, 1942, was the year that the gas was first used at Auschwitz. And I was raised in this family of a mixed family of very secular Jews and very secular Germans. And so there was this very intense childhood. We were not, fortunately, we were not affected directly, aside from a family of cousins that were still in Europe, most of whom did not survive. But it was something I grew up with. And since I was in a family of secular people, uh, there was no religion. And I became fascinated with it as a kid. So I was investigating it, and I loved the music, and I loved the pageantry, and I loved all the stuff. But I'm fairly young. I think maybe high school, if not early college, simply recognize myself as an agnostic or atheist. I flipped back and forth. Um, and at that point, I decided to investigate religions. And each time I did, I made the discovery that this theistic thing, I couldn't buy into it, but I wanted to belong. I didn't want to be out there by myself, and I couldn't figure out how to do that. So, to make a long story short, I went through orthodoxy to the point as I describe in the piece. Um, and then I got into Zen. And when I came out of the Zen experience, um, and moved back to LA, I had lived on the Central Coast for quite a while in San Luis Obispo. When I came back to LA, I got involved in conservative Judaism, but the same thing came up. It was a stumbling block, and I just thought, well, I like being in a big room with all those people and not feeling alone and all that. But it kept coming up. It kept coming up. And I kind of gave up, and I stopped keeping kosher in my apartment, and I just felt a little lost. And then I discovered this group of people who are very similar to me. I do have a kind of a weird cosmology. I have this idea that there may have been a deity, but like Angels in America, that's quite a philosophical piece. It's brilliant. Um, the main character decides that God left. And because it's San Francisco, he left on the day that San Francisco had the great earthquake, April 18th, 1906. I don't know if I have a date, but I certainly think in the 20th century or before that, I think God left. There may have been one, but he sure ain't around now. And even though I have this kind of droll, heavy, uh, I don't know how to describe it. I, Humanistic Judaism is helping me lighten up from this heavy childhood and this search that I kept finding myself lost in rather than found. And basically, at this point, I feel found. And I was at the LA Phil yesterday, Missa Solemnis, Beethoven. And I was sitting there thinking, I am waiting for humanistic Jews of some sort or other to make an oratorio without all of this. There's a whole lot of creed in it and everything, Christianity and all that. I would like a humanistic Judaism oratorio. So any musicians out there, Jonathan, who want to write an oratorio, I'm waiting. And I hope it's a lot like either Philip Glass or who am I? I'm seeing I can't think of his name. He's conducting and performing his own work in April, also at the LA Phil, a contemporary composer. I'm waiting. I'm patient.
Well, if we can get enough money together, we can ask Philip Glass to do it. I think he's on our team.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
that's really fascinating what you're saying about wanting to belong and not willing to be intellectually dishonest, right?
That's exact. That's the words I would use
Yeah,
those words.
there is a phenomenon in stricter forms of religious life called fictionalism, which isn't a great term because it can mean so many different things, but it's basically the idea that one will subscribe and adhere to the strictures of whatever that tradition might be for the benefits of it, even if they don't believe. They just kind of go along with it. That's why it's fictional.
Hmm.
So you're playing the role, and it sounds like you tried to do that actually in much of what you described, going to Israel to that very from Orthodox setting. You tried, and eventually it didn't work for you.
I actually don't think it ever did. I
Hmm.
thought it did, but I mean, I was deluded, you know. I wanted it, so I believed it was true, and it didn't work.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I hope this is inspiring some questions and comments. If our audience wants to participate, please. You can again raise your hand if you know that function, or we can keep our eyes out for your hand, your actual hand. Looks like Susan, you have something.
Yes, thank you both. You're both very inspiring, and I appreciate your stories very much. I'm in San Francisco, and I used to sing at that hospice with the Threshold Choir, probably a number of years after you were there, and it shortly before it closed. But as a as a fellow Jubu, I always struggle with this pull between universalism and tribalism, and it's always a difficulty for me. Have you had to deal with that in any way? Or
Well,
maybe not.
if I understand what you mean, I think I know it may sound silly, but Zen gets past all that. At least that's been my experience. And it's given me a universal feeling around humanistic Judaism. I don't know if I would have escaped the idea that we're a tribe, you know. And the way that happens is, as I was explaining, you know, you see your thoughts, your feelings, etc., disappear. They come back, then they disappear, then they change. And it's allowed me to Zen allowed me to let go of the idea of a tribe and join the human race in a way that I never did before. I think the image that I conjured in the article is feeling like Dorothy walking out of her black and white room after the tornado and walking into the colors for the first time. That's exactly what it feels like to me. And it's to me that's universal.
I think the challenge of universalism and particularism, as both of you are alluding to, is really deep and embedded in Jewish life in particular. I know in our community over the years we've joked around, are we humanistic Jews or are we Jewish people who happen to be humanistic? Like which one do we prioritize? And I think we can also oscillate, right? Some days I feel very tribal and particularistic. Other days I feel very universal and, part of the human family. I don't know if it has to be an either or. Kind of like what you're saying, Ari, you can be part of this group and own that, but also see beyond it, maybe simultaneously, or maybe in the morning you feel one way, in the afternoon you feel a different way. You know, two Jews, three opinions means that there's at least one and a half opinion per Jew. So, you know,
Thank you.
I think I would just briefly add, Susan, to your awesome question that the more high tech we seem to get and the farther away from human to human contact we get, the more we all become one human tribe, with corporations and systems kind of being the alternative. So I think we're all sort of being forced in and funneled into the same tribe, and we hopefully are paying good attention to our land and our water as we go in hurtling into the future. So
Samantha has an interesting comment slash question. Do either of you have ideas, like maybe a concert, of small events or group activities to let folks know about our version of Judaism? You're both so creative, so I'm thinking the memoir writers workshop or documentary viewing, like some way that we can perhaps, through your guidance in the projects that you do, like maybe help to spread the word about uh, humanistic Judaism, even, if you've ever thought about those things.
I'm just beginning to think about those things, stimulated by working along with all of you on this magazine article. That started me thinking about, I've got a couple of ideas which we can talk about, later, but that's what started me, but I'm just evolving at this stage.
You are involved, Ari, in writers' workshops,
Hmm.
right?
I'm missing mine tonight to be with
Oh,
you.
sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
Yeah, I think there is something to that. And it looks like Samantha's in Rhode Island, where they don't really have a lot of this, culture there in terms of humanistic Judaism. Um, Online writers' workshops to do memoir writing around our journeys, and with that kind of framework that you articulate in the magazine article would be very interesting.
Well, I sent my group the article. I tried to send that's text stuff. Tried to send the whole thing, but I couldn't do it. It was too big. But I sent them the article, and that's already stimulated some comments
Yeah.
and conversation.
I think also one of the things, Maggie, that I love about your films is that they're not so polished that they seem unapproachable. Like you really are capturing people in their real lives as they live
Hmm.
them. There's not a lot of smoke and mirrors, or glitz or glamour or anything like that. Is there a way to learn, like, just for amateurs, how to make movies like that, maybe about our own families, or, there may be some way of kind of doing a memoir approach, but through film as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I'd be happy to lead a workshop. I was thinking of going to hospices recently and approaching um, caregivers, especially the daughters and sons and children of people who are dying, and offering them, most people have some kind of smartphone so they could capture it. If you have like a basic Zoom recorder, you could capture sound without much trouble, as long as there's not a ton of white noise in the background. And then it's just a matter of getting one of us who can sit and do the editing for you to capture the pace of the actual person who's living it, so that they are telling the story truly in the way that it would be if you were sitting in front of them. But I feel like almost anyone in their family in the future would love, sort of as a version of like an ethical will, to leave 3 to 5 minutes of footage for their kids and grandkids that they never get to meet. It would be so neat. We have this technology and literally in our hands. It would be free, to do it. So I'd be happy to lead a workshop like that. And also, I was already thinking to just go around to Tucson. There's so many elderly people here, and try to capture as many as we can, because it is something that lasts forever, so, or as long as forever is, right? So we might as well try. It seems like a good idea.
Yeah,
I
that's
keep
great.
I keep wondering why I didn't hear of this a long time ago. I I mean, everybody knows about Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, Reconstruction. I mean, we all know about all those things. And I don't understand why, at least in the world I was in, mostly in California, certainly in the West, New Mexico and Texas and California, um, I never ran across it. And it was, I don't understand why that is that way. So, well, that's just a question I have.
I think Miriam is probably the best position to answer that, but it's a struggle for sure. I know, historically and currently. So there are some great comments as well. If I can read some of those, I know Richard Logan's done a lot of work around Johnny Clegg in South Africa, and he says that his Jewish marginality and humanist values led him to appreciate his shared humanity with South Africa's marginalized blacks, like the Zulu people. His music also helped tear down the very anti-human apartheid system. That's, I think, really important too. This is a way of somebody through the arts really connecting with the broader human family, and also with his own perhaps Jewish identity as a result of that. I think we see these kinds of stories often playing out in real time. But the arts is just such a wonderful and humanizing way to connect. I think both of you can speak to that, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to give us any inspirational words.
Well, I mean, just like music, everyone has a heartbeat, and everyone has their own story, their own version of reality, whether it's verbal or just getting someone to draw something, or just asking them and taking the time to listen to the way that they're seeing the same exact world that you are in a completely different way. And it's totally beautiful that every single person here is listening, but having a totally different response right now. And the more that we are expansive and find the love and compassion and beauty that we're all different, instead of imposing and narrowing and saying, oh, I don't like that about you or that about you, it's gonna, hopefully, having access to more stories and more reality versions is just going to make everybody's life better and richer. And I think this is this is a key to humanistic Judaism, that is like the secret of life, essentially, to be able to live, and survive and be spiritually intact in such a harsh reality that we live in right now. So yeah, thanks to everybody for making such a beautiful community. It's awesome.
Yeah. And Ari, I'm wondering, in your expansive knowledge and experience in the art world, what is it about the arts that is so appealing? I mean, I'm in that field as well, but I don't know if I've ever asked myself this question. Just sort of assumed that the arts are important. Have you thought about that at all?
Oh, I've thought about it a lot. I kind of echo what has already been said, what Maggie was saying about film. There's something about science that, at least the way it's practiced lately in the last, what, 50 years or whatever, it stopped being human. It became clinical, or it became, I mean, I don't mean to imply that the motivation, especially in medical stuff, was not to meet people where they were in experiencing illness and so forth. But the arts have a way of communicating with our humanity in a more immediate way. And uh, it's interesting to me. I'm really a big fan of 21st century music. Um, I mentioned Philip Glass, and I still can't remember the name of the composer that's going to perform in April. But I, I didn't really get emotionally uh, connected to the Beethoven yesterday in a way that I did to a concert I was at quite a while ago now. It just got inside of me in a way that I don't think I've ever felt so connected. And I performed as a younger man. I performed actually Missa Solemnis and the B minor and the Messiah more times than I wish I had, and all those big oratorios. I was always in the chorus. And film as well. And there's something about all of the arts that connects us to each other and to ourselves. It's a remarkable what? It's remarkable.
Thank you. Paul, we're right at the hour. I don't know if you want to say anything.
I just want to say thank you so much. And I feel like we have so many amazing people involved in humanistic Judaism, and it's great to meet the two of you. And thank you so much for sharing that. I heard so many themes that I found interesting. I think the universal and the particular is one that we may want to tackle with an entire issue of the magazine.
Yeah.
But also the way that humanistic Jews engage in the world, I think has been touched on in a variety of ways tonight, including, first of all, looking inward, right, through the Zen meditation, imagining what the actual story is if we don't believe in the creation stories that were handed down to us through religion, but still wonder, how did this happen? This idea of like God withdrawing is one that my very first job in the Jewish community was for a rabbi named Yitz Greenberg, who's this Orthodox theologian who kind of came up with a similar theory because he still wanted to believe that God handed down the Torah on Mount Sinai, but then he came up with this idea that as humans became less childlike and closer to God himself, that God withdraws. And so the Holocaust happened because God has withdrawn, right? I thought it was gymnastics, mental gymnastics to come up with a belief that there was a God originally at Sinai, but I just think that grappling with what is out there is part of the existence along with the internal. And then both of you dedicated a significant amount of your time and still do to serving the other, serving the folks who have less than, and how that was driven by your values as well. So you touched on so many different things. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Jonathan, for pulling this all together. And thanks everybody for coming. And we'll do another one with our next issue, which you want to announce what the theme is, Jonathan?
Oh, yeah. It's kind of, in some ways, it's a continuation. In some ways, it's out of left field, I suppose. But it's going to be on rock and roll.
Jews and rock and roll.
Sure, of course. I think that was implied, maybe.
Is it? It doesn't have to be. I'd love to
Yeah.
work with Led Zeppelin somehow,
We
but
we have a lot of wonderful things in store for you in that issue. Whether or not you like rock and roll, it's a really interesting part of Jewish American history.
well, thank you all again, everybody, and have a great night and stay warm if you're in a cold place. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
You.